The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Joy smelled like sweat, diesel fuel, and bad coffee that had been sitting since 0400. Staff Sergeant Marcus Hale stood at the front of the plywood table, arms crossed, staring at the satellite imagery projected onto a canvas tarp someone had nailed to the wall. The image showed a cluster of mud brick compounds nestled in a valley, surrounded by ridges that climbed nearly 3,000 meters into the Hindu Kush. "This is where they're holding him," said Captain Rachel Voss, the intelligence officer who'd flown in from Bagram that morning. She tapped the screen with a laser pointer, circling a single structure at the valley's eastern edge. Sergeant First Class Ahmad Nasiri, Afghan National Army. He was captured 4 days ago during a patrol near the Pakistan border. Sigin confirms Taliban fighters moved him here yesterday. Hale didn't move. His eyes traced the ridgelines, the dried riverbeds, the elevation markers. He'd been in Kunar province for 11 months. He knew what those mountains did to men who underestimated them. "How many hostiles?" Corporal Ethan Wade asked from the corner. Wade was 22, lanky, with a North Carolina drawl that never quite left his voice even after 2 deployments. He was Hale's spotter, had been since Hellmanned. They logged over 300 hours together in hides, counting heartbeats between trigger pulls. Voss clicked to the next slide. Grainy drone footage showed figures moving between buildings. Estimated 15 to 20 fighters. Mix of local Taliban and possibly foreign advisors. They know we'll come from Nasiri. They're waiting. "Of course they are," Hale muttered. "It's a kill box." The room went quiet. Everyone knew what he meant. The valley was a natural ambush point. High ground on 3 sides, limited egress routes, no cover for a helicopter landing zone. Any direct assault would get shredded before the first boot hit the ground. The Taliban had been fighting in these mountains for centuries. They knew every rock, every sight line, every place to bury an IED. Captain Voss leaned forward. "Hire wants him back. Nasiri has been working with us for 2 years. He's got intelligence on cross-border smuggling routes, Taliban safe houses in Peshawar, names of financiers in Quetta. If they interrogate him properly, or worse, trade him to the Haqqani network, we lose a critical asset and embolden every insurgent in the province." Hale finally looked up. "So you want to rescue op in terrain that favors them, with a fortified position, unknown reinforcements, and a forklift hump through open ground to get there?" "I want options," Voss said evenly. "And you're the best sniper team in the AO." Hale glanced at Wade, who raised an eyebrow. Then he looked at Lance Corporal Javier Ruiz and Corporal Daniel Cho, the other half of his 4-man team. Ruiz was the youngest, 19, a kid from El Paso who could read wind better than anyone Hale had ever trained. Cho was a quiet one, Korean-American, former competitive shooter, now the team's designated marksman with an M110 semi-automatic. Together, they'd operated in Sanjin, Marja, and now the deadliest province in Afghanistan. "We're not going in loud," Hale said finally. "If we do this, we do it our way." Voss nodded. "You have 24 hours to plan. Wheels up at 2,200 tomorrow." The 4 Marines sat around a folding table covered in topographic maps, laminated imagery, and notebooks filled with range cards and wind calculations. A single LED lantern cast harsh shadows across their faces. Hale traced a finger along the valley's northern ridgeline. "If we come in from the west, standard infantry approach, they'll see us 2 clicks out. We'll be walking into pre-sighted firing positions. What about hello insert on the high ground?" Ruiz suggested. Cho shook his head. "Birds can't operate above 10,000 feet in this heat. And the second they hear rotors, they'll execute Nasiri and scatter." Wade leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head. "So we don't give them a front to watch." Hale looked at him. "Go on. They're expecting us to come at them. What if we make them come to us?" "A bait and switch," Cho said slowly. "More than that." Wade sat forward, eyes bright. "We make them think they're setting the ambush. We give them a target they can't resist, something that makes them move out of position. Then we turn their kill box into ours." Hale studied the map again, his mind running through scenarios. The Taliban fighters would have sentries on the ridges, overlapping field of fire, rally points. But they'd also have egos. Commanders who wanted glory. Fighters who've been waiting weeks for a chance to kill Americans. What if we fake a withdrawal? Ruiz said suddenly. Make them think we're pulling back, that the rescue's off. They'll relax, reposition, maybe even move Nasiri. Or we stage a distraction convoy, Cho added. Something visible, loud, heading away from a valley. Make them think the main effort is somewhere else. Hale felt the pieces clicking together. And while they're watching the wrong thing, we're already in place, on the high ground, waiting. Wade grinned. Let them walk into the scope. For the next 6 hours, they built the plan. It was intricate, fragile, dependent on perfect timing and terrain analysis. But it was also exactly the kind of operation that played to their strengths. Patience, precision, and the willingness to let the enemy think they were winning, right up until the moment they weren't. The concept was simple in theory, brutal in execution. A Marine rifle platoon would stage a visible movement toward a secondary valley 5 kilometers west of the target area, complete with vehicle noise, radio chatter on frequencies the Taliban monitored, and deliberate exposure on ridgelines. It would look like a botched attempt at stealth, the kind of American overconfidence the insurgents had learned to exploit. Meanwhile, Hale's team would insert via helicopter 8 clicks north, moving on foot through the night to establish a sniper hide overlooking the compound. They wouldn't rescue Nasiri directly. Instead, they'd wait for the Taliban to react to the decoy force, to shift their fighters, expose their command structure, reveal their defensive positions. And when the enemy committed to what they believed was an ambush on the American platoon, the snipers would collapse the trap from a direction the Taliban never saw coming. It's a reverse ambush, Voss said when they presented the plan at 0600. She studied the map, tracing the movements. You're banking on them taking the bait. They will, Hale said with certainty. They've been waiting for a chance like this. A full platoon stumbling into their backyard, they won't be able to resist. And if they don't move, then we adapt. We got eyes on the compound. If they stay put, we identify their leadership, map their patterns, and call in a precision strike when the window opens. Voss looked at the 4 Marines, young men with old eyes, faces weathered by sun and war. She knew their records. Hale had 43 confirmed kills. Wade had been awarded a Bronze Star for actions in Sanjin. Cho had once held a defensive position alone for 6 hours, while his platoon evacuated casualties. Ruiz had scored expert marksman at Camp Pendleton before he was old enough to buy beer. You have authorization, she said finally. But understand, if this goes sideways, there's no quick reaction force close enough to pull you out. You'll be alone up there. Hale nodded. We always are. The CH-47 Chinook's ramp dropped at 0230, and the 4 Marines stepped into absolute darkness. The helicopter's rotors kicked up dust and gravel as it lifted off, disappearing into the night sky within seconds. The silence that followed was total. Hale activated his night vision goggles. The world turned green. He could see the jagged peaks rising around them, the narrow goat trail that would take them south toward the valley. Each man carried 70 pounds of gear: sniper rifles, spotting scopes, ammunition, water, camouflage netting, range finders, radios. No body armor. Too heavy. Too loud. Comms check. Hale whispered into his radio. 2, Wade replied. 3, Cho said. 4, Ruiz confirmed. They moved in single file, spacing 15 meters apart. The terrain was brutal. Loose shale that threatened to give way with every step. Narrow ridges with 1,000-foot drops on either side. Hale set a slow, deliberate pace. Speed didn't matter. What mattered was arriving undetected. The night was cold at this altitude, their breath visible even through the nods. Every 20 minutes, Hale called a halt, and they listened, straining to hear footsteps, voices, the metallic click of a weapon being readied. But there was only wind and the distant sound of rockfalls somewhere in the darkness. For hours later, as the sky began to pale in the east, they reached the hide site Hale had identified from the satellite imagery, a cluster of boulders on a ridgeline overlooking the valley from the northwest, roughly 1,200 meters from the target compound. It offered concealment, multiple escape routes, and, most importantly, a perfect downward angle into the valley floor. They spent the next hour constructing the hide, Camouflage netting was draped over the rocks, blending seamlessly with the surrounding terrain. Cho and Ruiz set up observation posts on the flanks. Wade positioned the spotting scope, calibrating for distance, elevation, and the shifting wind that poured down from the peaks. Hale settled behind his M40A5 sniper rifle, a weapon he'd carried through 2 deployments and countless engagements. He chambered a .308 round and adjusted the scope's parallax. Through the glass, he could see the compound clearly. Sentries on the rooftops, a cook fire in the courtyard, figures moving between buildings. Target compound confirmed. Wade murmured, reading off the laser rangefinder. 1,230 meters. Wind, from miles per hour, left to right. Temperature, 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure, stable. Hale made the adjustments, his fingers moving automatically. At this distance, a single miscalculation, a gust of wind, a shift in temperature, could send a round 2 feet off target. Through a scope, Hale began cataloging what he saw. 2 sentries on the main building's roof, both carrying AK-47s. A third man, older, with a gray beard, appeared to be issuing orders near a pickup truck, possibly a commander. For more fighters visible in the courtyard, one cleaning a PK machine gun. I count 7 hostiles in the open, Hale said quietly. Probable 8 to 10 more inside structures. No visual on the Siri yet. Wade added, scanning with the spotting scope. He'll be in the main building. Ground floor, probably restrained. They settled into the rhythm of observation. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, turning the valley floor into a furnace while the Marines remained in shadow on the ridge. They took turns on the optics, eating energy bars, sipping water sparingly. No movement except to shift weight, ease cramping muscles. At 1,147 hours, Ruiz's voice crackled in Hale's earpiece. Movement, southeast. 2 vehicles approaching. Hale swung his scope. A Toyota Hilux and a motorcycle were climbing the dirt road into the valley. The truck stopped at the compound. 6 men got out, all armed. One carried an RPG. Reinforcements. Wade muttered, that changes the math. Hale counted again. 23 hostiles now, possibly more he couldn't see. The odds had just gotten worse. His radio clicked twice, the signal from Captain Voss. The decoy platoon was beginning their movement. Now we wait, Hale said quietly, and we see who takes the bait. And in the mountains of Kinner Province, where patience was measured in heartbeats and millimeters of scope adjustment, for Marines became invisible, watching, calculating, and preparing to turn the enemy's confidence into their greatest vulnerability. First Lieutenant Cameron Hayes stood in the turret of the lead MRAP, scanning the ridge lines through his binoculars. Behind him, 3 more armored vehicles crawled along the dirt road in a loose column, deliberately kicking up dust visible for miles. His platoon, 32 Marines from Golf Company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, knew exactly what they were doing. They were bait. Overwatch. This is Reaper 6, Hayes said into his radio, using the call sign for Hale's sniper team. We're beginning the approach. How copy? Hale's voice came back, calm and unhurried. Reaper 6, Overwatch. We have eyes on. Compound is active. 20+ hostiles. No movement toward your position yet. Roger that. We'll give them something to look at. Hayes turned to his radio operator. All Reaper elements. This is 6. Execute noise discipline badly. I want them to hear us coming. The Marines complied with enthusiasm. Vehicle commanders started broadcasting on unsecured frequencies, discussing routes and timing in plain language. Engines revved unnecessarily. Someone even fired off a couple test rounds from an M240 machine gun, the sound echoing across the valley. To anyone listening, and the Taliban absolutely were listening, it sounded like an American unit trying and failing to be tactical, arrogant, careless, exactly the kind of target the insurgents had been trained to exploit. They're buying it, Wade said, watching through the spotting scope. Hale could see it too. Activity in the compound had increased. Men were gathering near the vehicles, gesturing toward the west. One fighter ran inside the main building and emerged seconds later with 2 others. They carried additional ammunition cans and what looked like a radio. "They're calling it in," Hale observed, coordinating. Sure enough, within 10 minutes, fighters began moving out of the compound. Not all of them. 6 men stayed behind, including the sentries, but a group of 12 climbed into the Hilux and the motorcycle, weapons bristling, heading toward the western ridgeline. "Overwatch, Reaper 6. We've got movement on the high ground. They're setting up." "Roger," Hale replied. "Count 12 hostiles moving to engage you. Maintain your route. Make them commit." Hayes watched the ridgeline ahead. He couldn't see the Taliban fighters, but he knew they were there, probably setting up a hasty ambush. Pecan machine guns in defilade positions, RPGs on the flanks, riflemen in overlapping fields of fire. It was a tried and true tactic that had killed American and coalition forces throughout the war. "Distance of probable ambush point?" he asked his driver. 1,500 meters, sir." Hayes did the math. Close enough to make the Taliban think they had a clean shot, far enough to give his Marines time to react when the shooting started. "All units, be ready to execute Fortress Protocol on my command." That was the code phrase for the platoon's rehearsed offensive maneuver. Vehicles forming a protective circle, Marines dismounting to cover positions, overwhelming return fire to break contact. They weren't actually planning to drive into the kill zone, but the Taliban didn't know that. Compound security is down to 6 hostiles. Cho reported from his flank position. 2 on the roof, 4 in the courtyard. Hale felt the pieces aligning. The Taliban had done exactly what he predicted. Divided their force, sent their best fighters to the ambush, left a skeleton crew to guard Nasiri. The enemy commander had made a tactical decision that seemed sound. Hit the American platoon hard, inflict casualties, then withdraw before air support arrived. But that decision had just exposed their command structure and created an opportunity. "Ruiz, talk to me about the main building," Hale said. "Single door, south side. 2 windows, both covered with fabric. Flat roof with 2 sentries. They're focused west, watching the fight develop." "Cho, what's your angle on the courtyard?" "Clear shot. 1,300 meters. Wind steady." Hale keyed his radio. "Reaper 6, Overwatch. We have a developing situation. Compound security is minimal. I'm seeing an opportunity for direct action." There was a pause. Hayes understood what Hale was really saying. The rescue window was opening, but only if they acted now, while the Taliban's attention was divided. "Overwatch, what's your recommendation?" "We can neutralize compound security and extract Nasiri, while the main force is committed to engaging you. But we need you to keep them focused west for the next 15 mics." Hayes checked his map. 15 minutes. His platoon could hold a defensive position that long, even under fire. And if Hale's team could pull off the rescue, it meant his Marines wouldn't have to assault a fortified compound, wouldn't have to clear rooms and eat RPG fire in close quarters. "Do it," Hayes said. "We'll give you the time." Hale turned to his team. "We're going kinetic. Wade, you got the sentries on the roof. Cho, you take the courtyard. Ruiz, you're with me on the building entry. We engage simultaneously on my mark. Precision only. No one fires unless they got a clean kill shot." The Marines moved with practiced efficiency. Wade adjusted his scope, calculating a hold for 2 targets at slightly different elevations. Cho shifted position, getting a better angle on the courtyard fighters. Ruiz slung his rifle and pulled out his M4 carbine, better for close quarters work. Range the primary targets. 1,230 meters. Wade said, his voice flat, professional. "Wind, 5 miles per hour, quartering left. Temperature rising, 68 degrees. Mirage starting to build." Hale chambered around and settled behind his rifle. Through the scope, he could see one of the roof sentries clearly, a young man, maybe 20, leaning against a low wall, smoking a cigarette. He had no idea that 1,400 meters away, a Marine was calculating the exact point where a .308 bullet would intersect with his center mass. For a moment, Hale felt the familiar weight of it, the knowledge that he was about to end someone's life from a distance, so great the target would never even know the shot was coming. There was no honor in it, no cinematic drama. Just geometry, physics, and a deliberate application of violence. He pushed the feeling aside. Nasiri was in that building. A man who'd risked everything to help American forces, who had a family waiting for him in Kabul, who deserved better than to be executed in a Taliban compound while coalition forces debated the politics of rescue operations. All shooters, stand by. Hale said quietly. He controlled his breathing. Inhale, exhale, find a natural pause. Send it. Four rifles fired within half a second of each other. Wade's target dropped instantly, the cigarette still in his hand. The second sentry barely had time to register the crack of the first bullet before Wade's follow-up shot put him down. In the courtyard, Cho's M110 barked 3 times in rapid succession. 2 fighters collapsed. The third spun, looking for the source of the gunfire, and caught the 4th round in the chest. The remaining fighter in the courtyard tried to run. Cho tracked him smoothly, led him by 2 body lengths, and squeezed. The man stumbled and fell. Roof clear, Wade reported. Courtyard clear, Cho added. Moving, Hale said. He and Ruiz were already out of the hide, moving down the ridgeline at a controlled run. The terrain was treacherous, but they'd rehearsed this movement in their minds a dozen times. 700 meters to the valley floor. Another 500 to the compound. Behind them, Wade and Cho provided overwatch, scanning for threats, ready to engage anyone who emerged from the buildings. Hale's lungs burned as they descended. The altitude, the weight of his gear, the adrenaline, it all compressed into a singular focus. Get to Nasiri, get him out, get back to the extraction point. They hit the valley floor at a sprint. The compound was eerily quiet now, the bodies in the courtyard motionless in the morning sun. Hale moved to the door of the main building, Ruiz stacking behind him. No time for finesse. Hale kicked the door open and moved inside. Rifle up, the interior was dim, smelling with smoke and unwashed bodies. A narrow hallway led deeper into the structure. Hale moved methodically, slicing the pie on each doorway. Ruiz covering behind. 3rd room on the left. The door was reinforced with metal bars. Nasiri, Hale called in Dari. American Marines, we're getting you out. A weak voice answered from inside. Here, I'm here. Ruiz pulled a small breaching charge from his pack, set on the lock, and stepped back. Breaching. The explosion was sharp, contained. The door swung open. Inside, Sergeant Ahmad Nasiri sat against the wall, hands zip-tied behind him, face swollen from beatings. But his eyes were alert, defiant. Hale cut the restraints. Can you walk? Yes, I can walk. Then let's move. Now. They exited the building at a run, Nasiri between them. Wade's voice crackled in Hale's ear. Overwatch's movement. Enemy force is breaking contact with Reaper 6. They're heading back your way. ETA 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Not enough time to climb back to the hide. They needed another option. Hale scanned the compound and saw it. The Hilux truck the reinforcements had arrived in, still parked near the gate. Vehicle extract, he said. Ruiz, you drive. Cho, Wade, prepare to displace on our movement. They piled into the truck. Ruiz turned the ignition, and the engine roared to life. They crashed through the compound gate and onto the dirt road, heading north. Behind them, Taliban fighters were already appearing on the ridgelines, realizing too late that they'd been outmaneuvered. The Hilux bounced violently over the rutted road, suspension screaming as Ruiz pushed the accelerator to the floor. In the passenger seat, Hale gripped his rifle and scanned the ridgelines through the cracked windshield. Nasiri sat in the cramped back seat, hunched low, one hand pressed against his ribs where the Taliban had beaten him. Overwatch, Havoc 1. Hale said, using the call sign for the mobile element. We have jackpot. Moving north on Route Amber. Request immediate exfil. Wade's voice came back, tense but controlled. Havoc 1. Be advised, multiple enemy vehicles converging on your position from the west. Count 3 technicals. Approximately 20 hostiles. They're moving fast. Hale looked in the side mirror and saw the dust plumes rising from the valley behind them. The Taliban had realized what happened. They weren't just pursuing. They were hunting. Reaper 6, Havoc 1. We're going to need that air support you promised. Lieutenant Hayes responded immediately. Havoc 1, Reaper 6. Fast movers are 12 minutes out. Hellfire's on station in 8. Can you make it to grid November? Victor 2847? It's a flat zone, suitable for hello pickup. Hale checked his map, doing the mental math. November Victor 2847 was 3 kilometers north and dried up riverbed with enough open space for a CH-47 to land. 3 kilometers. With Taliban fighters closing from behind and possibly more setting up blocking positions ahead. Roger. Moving to November Victor. Tell the birds will be hot. Ruiz yanked the wheel hard, taking him off the main road onto a barely visible trail that cut through a narrow wadi. The truck tilted at a dangerous angle, 2 wheels lifting off the ground before slamming back down. Rocks pinged off the undercarriage like gunfire. How's our guess? Hale asked, glancing back. Nasiri managed a pained smile. I've had worse rides. Keep going. The sound of gunfire erupted behind them, the distinctive crack of AK-47s, followed by the heavier thump of a DSHK heavy machine gun. Round snapped past the truck, one punching through the tailgate. Contact rear. Hale shouted. He twisted in his seat, braced his M4 against the door frame, and returned fire. 3-round bursts controlled, aimed at the lead pursuing vehicle. He saw the windshield spiderweb, the truck swerve. But there were 2 more right behind it. Wade and Cho were in controlled chaos mode, breaking down the hide at record speed. Camouflage netting was stuffed into packs. Rifles were slung. Within 90 seconds, they were moving down the ridgeline, taking a different route than Hale and Ruiz had used, one that would bring them to the exfil point from the east. Overwatch displacing, Wade reported between breaths. 2 mics to November Victor. As they ran, Wade heard the sound of rotor blades in the distance. The attack helicopters were inbound, but would they arrive before the Taliban cut Hale's team off? The Hilux burst out of the wadi onto a wider section of road. Ahead, Hale could see the dried riverbed, a flat expanse of sand and gravel stretching 300 meters wide, perfect for a landing zone. But they had to cross 200 more meters of open ground to reach it. And then he saw them. 2 Taliban fighters stepped out from behind a boulder at the road's edge, one hefting an RPG to his shoulder. RPG front. Hale screamed. Ruiz cut the wheel hard left. The rocket-propelled grenade whooshed past, missing the truck by meters, and detonated against a rock outcropping in a bloom of fire and shrapnel. Hale leaned out the window and fired. The RPG gunner went down. The second fighter raised his AK, but Hale's rounds found him first. They were almost there. 100 meters. 50. The Hilux skidded onto the riverbed in a cloud of dust. Ruiz brought it to a sliding stop and killed the engine. Out! Out! Hale shouted. The 3 men tumbled from the truck and took up defensive positions behind it. Using the vehicle as cover, Hale scanned the surrounding terrain. The riverbed was surrounded by low ridges on 3 sides, natural choke points. The pursuing Taliban vehicles would have to approach through narrow defile, limiting their ability to maneuver. It was defensible. For a few minutes, at least. Havoc 1 set at November Victor, Hale reported. Where's my bird? Inbound! 2 minutes, Hayes replied. Gunships are engaging hostile vehicles now. As if summoned by the words, Hale heard the distinctive growl of an H-64 Apache helicopter. The aircraft appeared over the western ridge, low and fast. Its 30mm chain gun opened up, the sound like ripping canvas magnified 1,000 times. Through his rifle scope, Hale saw one of the pursuing technicals disintegrate under the withering fire, the truck flipping end over end in a spray of metal and bodies. The second vehicle tried to reverse, but a Hellfire missile turned it into a fireball. The third truck stopped, fighters bailing out and scattering into the rocks. That's what I'm talking about, Ruiz shouted. But Hale knew better than to celebrate. The Taliban had just lost 3 vehicles, but there were still fighters in the hills, experienced men who knew how to use terrain, who'd been fighting American helicopters for years. They'd go to ground, wait for the birds to leave, then come back with a vengeance. Stay sharp, Hale ordered. This isn't over. He was right. 30 seconds later, gunfire erupted from the northern ridge, the one direction the Apache wasn't covering. Rounds cracked past Hale's position, kicking up sand. He saw muzzle flashes among the rocks, counted at least 6 shooters. Contact north. Multiple hostiles in the rocks. The 3 Marines returned fire, laying down suppressive bursts. But they were exposed, pinned behind a thin-skinned vehicle with limited ammunition. Then Wade's voice came over the radio, calm as ever. Havoc 1, Overwatch. We have eyes on your contact. Engaging. From the eastern ridge, 1,400 meters away, Wade and Cho had set up a hasty firing position. Wade was behind his spotting scope, calling corrections. Cho was on the M110, working the targets methodically. First target, center mass, send it. Cho fired. Through his scope, he saw a Taliban fighter jerk backward and disappear behind the rocks. Hit. Next target, right side, elevated position. Another shot. Another hit. They're displacing, Wade observed, shifting west. Stay on them. For 3 minutes, Cho and Wade worked the ridge like surgeons, suppressing the Taliban fighters, disrupting their ability to maintain effective fire on Hale's position. It wasn't about killing everyone. It was about buying time. And then Hale heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the deep whump-whump-whump of SH-47 Chinook's rotors. The massive helicopter came in fast and low, flaring hard over the riverbed. Sand exploded outward in a rotor-wash hurricane. The rear ramp was already down, a crew chief waving them in. Move, move, move. Hale grabbed Nassiri and ran. Ruiz was right behind them. Firing control burst back toward the northern ridge. They sprinted up the ramp. The crew chief grabbed Nassiri and pulled him inside. Hale and Ruiz collapsed onto the metal floor, gasping. Overwatch, get on this bird now. Hale shouted into his radio. 30 seconds. Wade replied. The Chinook held position, rotors screaming, while Wade and Cho made their final sprint down the eastern ridge. They hit the riverbed at a full run, kit bouncing, lungs burning. 15 meters. 10. 5. They dove onto the ramp just as the pilot pulled pitch. The Chinook lurched into the sky, banking hard to the west. Rounds pinged off the fuselage, but they were already out of effective range. Hale looked out the open ramp as the valley fell away beneath them. He could see the burning wreckage of the Taliban vehicles, the scattered fighters on the ridges, the compound where they'd started this whole operation. And then it was gone, swallowed by the mountains. Fob Joyce, 1,430 hours. The Chinook touched down in a storm of dust and noise. Medical personnel rushed forward with a stretcher from the Nassiri, but the Afghan sergeant waved them off. I can walk, he insisted, though he leaned heavily on a corpsman's shoulder. Captain Voss was waiting on the flight line. She looked at the 4 Marines, filthy, exhausted, streaked with sweat and dust, and allowed herself a small smile. I heard it got interesting out there. Just another day in Cunner, ma'am, Hale said. She handed him a bottle of water. Nassiri's already talking. He's got names, locations, supply routes, everything we hoped for. Hire is very pleased. Hale nodded, too tired to feel satisfaction. He watched as Nassiri was helped toward the aid station. The man turning back wants to meet Hale's eyes and give a slight nod of gratitude. How many did we lose? Hale asked quietly. None. Lieutenant Hayes' platoon took some small arms fire, but no casualties. The Taliban lost at least 18 Kia, 3 vehicles destroyed, and their command structure in that valley is shattered. The math of war. 18 men dead, so 1 could live. Hale had stopped trying to calculate whether it was worth it years ago. He just did the mission and let others decide the morality. Get some rest, Voss said. You've earned it. As the team walked toward their hooch, Wade fell into step beside Hale. You think they'll learn? Stop falling for the same tricks. Hale shrugged. Doesn't matter. We'll just come up with new ones. Behind them, the Afghan sun beat down on a base that had seen too much war, in a province that had known nothing but conflict for generations. The war on terror ground on, mission after mission, valley after valley. But for today, 4 Marines had turned an impossible rescue into a perfect trap, and 1 good man was going home. The debriefing room was packed. Battalion intelligence officers, Operations staff, a MARSOC liaison, even a civilian from Langley whose name no one bothered to learn. They all wanted to understand how a four-man sniper team had pulled off what conventional planning deemed impossible. Staff Sergeant Marcus Hale stood at the front, using a laser pointer to walk through the operation on a digital map projected against the plywood wall. The key was never about superior firepower. Hale explained. We were outnumbered 5-1, operating in enemy-controlled terrain with no quick reaction force. Conventional tactics would have gotten us killed, so we used their assumptions against them. Colonel Briggs, the battalion commander, leaned forward, but you were still extracting under fire, heavily pursued. What made you confident you could make it to the LZ? We weren't confident, sir. We were committed. There's a difference. Hale paused. In sniper operations, you learn to think in probabilities, not certainties. We calculated that the Apache gunships would arrive before the Taliban could mass enough force to overrun us. We were right. Barely. The Langley civilian spoke up. Sergeant Nassiri has provided intelligence that's already resulted in 3 successful raids on Taliban safe houses in Pakistan. Your operation didn't just rescue an asset. It disrupted an entire smuggling network. Hale met her eyes. It feels like we did our job, ma'am. Nothing more. But lying in his rack at night, he kept seeing the faces through a scope. The young sentry with the cigarette. The fighters in the courtyard who died never knowing where the shots came from. Enemy combatants. Legitimate targets. And he'd still ended their lives from a distance so great they'd never had a chance to surrender. This was the part they never talked about in the official reports. Wade found Hale sitting on an empty ammo crate, staring out the mountains. You've been quiet since the debrief, Wade said, lighting a cigarette. Hale was silent for a long moment. You ever think about what they tell themselves? The guys we shoot, they've got families, kids. They probably think they're defending their country from invaders. He rubbed his face. And I put rounds through them from half a mile away. Wade considered this. The day it gets easy is the day you should worry. The day you stop seeing them as human is the day you become what we're supposed to be fighting against. How you deal with it. I remember guys like Nassiri, people who risked everything to help us, who believed we'd have their backs. When we pulled them out, we kept a promise. That matters. They sat in silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. You thinking about re-enlisting? Wade asked. Hale shook his head. My contract's up in 4 months. I think I'm done. I've been at war for 8 years. 3 deployments. I've seen enough. The ceremony was brief. Navy Cross for Staff Sergeant Marcus Hale. Silver Stars for Wade, Cho, and Ruiz. Later, the team gathered at a bar in Oceanside, still in their dress blues. To the impossible rescue, Wade said, raising his beer. To the perfect trap, Cho added. At some point, Hale stepped outside. His phone buzzed. A text from Captain Voss. Nassiri sends his regards. He's safe, reunited with his family. Your mission mattered, Marcus. Don't forget that. Hale looked up at the California sky, at the stars that were the same ones shining over Kinner Province, over men who were at this moment making the same impossible calculations. The war would continue. It always did. But this war, his war, was over. Marcus Hale stood in front of a classroom of high school students in rural North Carolina. I'm going to tell you a story, he said, about a rescue mission that shouldn't have worked, about a team of Marines who turned an enemy's trap into their own, and about why, 3 years later, I still think about whether we made the right choices. As he began to speak, students leaned forward, genuinely interested, and for the first time since leaving the service, Marcus Hale felt like maybe there was a way to make sense of it all, not by forgetting, not by glorifying, but by honestly examining what war asks of those who fight it. Outside, the afternoon sun shone on a peaceful American town, thousands of miles and a lifetime away from the mountains where snipers still watched and made impossible decisions. But the lessons lived on, and maybe Hale thought that was enough.